Hey everyone. Okay, so since I posted the last video, I've already had some people over on my YouTube, not my YouTube channel, my Instagram page, ask if there was any more details I could give about the commander-in-chief situation or kind of what I saw. So I'm going to try to make this one just very specific and go a little bit more in depth into what I saw around that. Okay, so when I started having the dreams about the changing of the guard, the changing of the governmental systems, that this system that we had in place all over the world, that there was going to be a transition period. And so as I had these dreams, each one of the dreams would then offer me a little bit more information or a little bit more detail in them. When they first started, at the time, President Trump was the president of the United States, and I would see him. And so I want to, one, we're going to use him as a symbolic figure, two, maybe his literal self. And then a couple of times I saw children of his. Now, that can be symbolic of generations. Of you have one generation and then another generation is raised up. And as these generations are raised up, it's almost like the generation above them, their ceiling then becomes their children's floor, and so on and so forth. So just kind of keep those in the back of your mind as I'm talking about some of this. So when the dream started, I would see him on this big warship out in the middle of the ocean, and he was commanding from it's basically out in the middle of nowhere. He was not on a continent. One of the dreams, it was specifically about safety, that these commanders in a military sense were going to have a very specific safety protocol around them during this transition phase, because even in the physical and the spiritual sense, there is a lot of stuff that it gets stirred up, especially in any time of transition. And so it's just like a whirlwind of just like, and so there would be an extra hedge of protection around those leaders during this time of transition. Okay, so from that ship, we had our television stations, our phones, whatever it is that you were watching your news on, your information come through on, we could see him speaking from that place. And as he would speak from that place, we knew that it was basically like go time, that the transition had started. There was nothing fearful about it, although many people didn't understand what was happening. And so there was a little bit of this chaotic, like, do we believe this? Do we trust this? Do we not? Is this real? Is this not going on? But as the dream progressed, I was shown that people began to take to the streets. They were waving their American flags. People understood the transition that was happening and was actually very excited about it. Now, the second time I had a dream about that, we were in the streets with our flags, but people were raising flags that had jokers on them. There was this big fool in it. There had been a revealing of some people that had been operating behind the scenes that people just didn't know who they were, that didn't know their names. And on the back of the flags were pictures of all of these people. And so people began to call out into the streets and call out their names and say, hey, we see you now. You're not going to do this anymore. And so the people had an awareness and an understanding of what had actually been taking place. And we were breaking free. We were letting them know, we're not going to sit in this anymore. We're not going to sit in that system anymore. You are going to devolve that back to the people. The people will now take our sovereignty back. Okay, so then, that was probably the second or third dream. The next ones, they went more into what would it look like as a transition occurred. And I saw leaders that we have now, ones that people trusted, ones that had been operating in a very truthful manner, were able to stay on the scene to help with this system to transition. But people began to be appointed by their local communities that would sit on these councils that then would go out from the local to the state to the region, all the way up to the federal systems, and even sit almost in a place like the UN sits right now, that these systems, they really big to really small. And in them, President Trump at one point would sit at the head at the really big place, where he had kind of become a behind the scenes type guy operating in these regions. And there were other people from other nations who sat at the same table. Like, it wasn't just him. And remember, he could be himself, or he could also just symbolize leaders of nations, presidents that we understand, or prime ministers, whatever it is that your nation calls your leader. But in that, they were sitting around a round table. So there was no one leader in this governmental system, as we keep hearing the NWO spoken out. And I'm not going to say that word, so most of you probably know what that means. But as that was happening, we knew that the NWO, with the leader sitting at the heads of the tables, were no longer going to be a thing. But now they're all sitting at circles, and they were at round tables where there was an equality that was happening. There was a new sense of excitement in the people, because we started to see things that were broken. Other people were being able to sit at the table and have a voice, and there was no more when you have two leaders here, like, I'm the head, I'm the big bad guy, I'm the ruler, I'm the king. It wasn't that. Okay, so people were really excited about that. Okay, so now I'm just going to take it strictly to the United States, because this is what I was shown, that as these councils arose, we began to have new voting systems. And the voting systems were based on policies, on what we would consider laws that were being put in place. And instead of sending our representative to vote on it, each individual person was actually voting. And we were voting from our phones, from our computers, our laptops. I knew it was a system that, I'm going to say, was run by satellites. Now, people that I have spoken to have said, well, hey, do you think this is Starlink? I was not specifically shown that, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't that, because I actually had these dreams before I understood or knew what Starlink was, and before that started going up in space and surrounding the globe right now. Space Force was something that I had a few dreams around kind of at the time that it started coming out, of like, what is this? I think there's a little bit more there than what we're being told. But also Space Force and their guardians were watching over the system that we were using more in a quantum way. And if you understand, like, quantum systems, like big computer systems, that our technology was going to change in such a way that, yes, it could be used to control people more, but if the right leadership was in place when these systems rolled out, that we weren't going to have to worry about that, but that the people who were now appointed to oversee these small localities, these councils, from small to very large groups across the world, that these leaders would see to it that the people kept their sovereignty, because it was all about, how are we going to be sovereign beings? How are we going to be sovereign nations again? How are we going to send control and devolve it back to the individual, into the culture, into the society, into the town, and not have these huge governmental systems that operate from thousands of miles away to your one little town and tell you what you can and can't do. That we weren't going to do that anymore. And in this process, humanity itself, like each individual person, was also growing and maturing in a way that we haven't seen, anytime since I've been alive. Like, it was going to happen so fast, it was almost like and we were there, because people awakened at such a fast rate and started doing their inner healing work and connecting more to their inner selves to understand what it means to get into this heart space. I talk about this so much because it's one of the biggest themes that I've been shown over the past 5 years in dreams, is everything comes from here. The kingdom of God is within. We have to internalize, go into, and stop trying to always think from our logical place. And then there's a lot of people that, when I talk to this, are like, there's just no way, Brandy. No way that logically, like, I can't even imagine. And I totally get it. I understand. All I can tell you is what I've seen, what I was shown. And sometimes I don't really care if our logical mind can't understand or grasp these thoughts, because that's not where we are right now. We are in a place where supernaturally things are changing, and it's things that we've been praying for a long time. It's things that people have been declaring and seeking and asking for. And here we are. And then all of a sudden, there's just no way that could logically happen. I totally get that and totally understand that. But also, the supernatural is real or it's not. God's real or it's not. We can work in signs, wonders, and miracles, or we can't. These things can change or they won't. Like, what are you going to get into agreement with, into alignment with? What type of thought process are you going to operate in? And what do you see? You get to choose. Do I see fully wide-eyed open? Or am I still like, I got blinders on and I can't really see. Oh, I want to see. I don't. Okay, let me see. It's kind of like that of where some people just aren't sure. Like, do I want to see? Do I not want to see? But it's your choice. You get to see if you want to see. You get to have more awareness if you choose to have more awareness. You can use that knowledge that you have for wisdom, but you have to choose those things. And so as I saw all of these things play out, I saw new generations coming up, new leaders coming up. Not that, I'm going to call it the old guard, but it wasn't necessarily that the old guard in some of these situations or people were doing anything wrong, but that it was time for the new generation to arise, that they had been equipped and prepared in their caves for a very long time. And a lot of people are going to go, where in the world did you come from? Where have you been this whole time? We needed you 10 years ago. You know where they were? They were being equipped at the time. They were being trained in their quiet place, in a place of solitude, to fully get into their heart, to fully surrender to what was coming, to have an understanding of what their walk was supposed to be like, for them to be trained in a way that they could truly find wisdom when it was time for finding wisdom, and that new technologies would come forward, that they would be able to see behind just the crap that's out there right now. They would be able to see straight through it. You couldn't fool them because their discernment was so on point. And that's why it's happening right now. Leaders like that they're being raised up. And so I saw, as I was like, well, who are these leaders going to be? I'm always praying about that. A lot of them are people that none of you know who they are. They have been trained. They're going to come from some small places. Some of them are going to come from big places. And some of them may even be children of people that we actually know right now. And a lot of us are going to go, where did you come? Where you been? Where you been this whole time? What? And asking questions like that. And it was just really an exciting time. Every time I had one of these dreams. One time I was taken into the UN. And so you know how the UN has I think it's the olive branch that's underneath it. In one of the dreams, that was like someone had taken their hand and chopped it and the whole thing fell off. And I kept going, why is that falling off? But I realized that organization was operating in a place where we see peace, but the veil was taken off and we got to see it for what it truly was. And so that was an eye-opener for me, because I hadn't really gone down that path when I started waking up to understand these organizations and systems in place. And so really pay attention to that, and just kind of watch it. You'll be able to start picking up some things and see with your own eyes. Start having some discernment about the things that you see come out of there, and why is that coming out of there, and who's running that place, what's operating inside of there, what kind of system is operating, what kind of laws are coming out of there, how much of that system is actually here in the U.S. Do we actually have territories here that that organization owns, even though it's on our land? Okay, and so, I'm just going to mention this and I'm going to end it. One of the biggest things in all of this was about the land, that we had to come to an understanding that we don't own the land. We steward the land, and we are to use the land in the way that it was always meant to be stewarded, not destroying it, not harming it, not hurting our waterways, but that there was going to be a cleansing process of the lands. And this goes into a lot of stuff with earthquakes and the volcanoes and the floods, whether they're symbolic, metaphorical, or actual physical events. We're seeing a lot of the physical events, but just know when you're seeing some of those things, that is part of the transition period that we're seeing. It's a cleansing of that, because we are coming into a place of sovereignty, and we have to understand what sovereignty is when we step into it, and we're going to, because that's just where we are, that's where we're going, and there's some really amazing transitions that are coming, and there's so much more. I just feel like I could talk about this for so long, but at the end of the day, it's what are we going to be in alignment with? What are we getting into agreement with? What do we say, nope, don't show me that. There's no way. There's just no way. That's impossible. Or show me the impossible, and I'm going to believe the impossible can come. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to talk about today on this one. If something else comes up, or if you guys have questions, and I know too, on some of these videos, some of you guys will say, hey, this is a dream I had. And it oftentimes is just another piece, because we all have these little pieces that when we start putting the puzzle together, we start seeing this way bigger picture, and start to have a better understanding of maybe things that we're waiting for revelation on, because you can see things and not always immediately have the revelation. And so that's a place that right now that we can all work together and talk together, communicate, having these open lines of communication. Whether we agree or disagree doesn't really matter. It's more about can we communicate with those that we don't completely align with to find where we actually do have something in common? Okay, God bless you guys.